Before we begin, I want to say that I have a poem in issue 12 of Butcher's Dog magazine, and it would really warm my little heart if you went out and purchased a copy. Butcher's Dog is a poetry journal that comes out twice a year, and earlier in the year you might have seen me retweeting on Twitter when they were asking for support. So they do need some monetary support so as they can bring out issue 13 and so as more poets can get the opportunity to actually have their work in print, like I have for the first time. Also, it's a very beautiful little magazine, and if you order it now, you may just be in with a chance of getting it before Christmas. However, you could always hand it out after Christmas and just blame the postman. I haven't been sponsored or asked to mention the magazine in this video, but I would be very happy if you did go out and you did get your hands on a copy, because there are some amazing poets in here as well whose work I have admired for a while, and to be included in a magazine with them is rather discombobulating, really. Hi everyone, my name is Charlie, and today I think I'm going to talk about scars. Today, the 18th of December 2019, marks 1 year since I came off the ladder. I was on a ladder and it fell over. If you go back to a video last year entitled A Hole in the Head, in which I tell you what happened from the comfort of my grandmother's back bedroom. I want to talk about that some more now that I am sober and a year has passed by, and then I want to actually share with you the video that I had planned to make that day a year ago. Let's go over the story first. We still hadn't put up our Christmas decorations, and I was determined that we were going to celebrate Christmas in my house. I didn't care how it happened, but I wanted a tree. I wanted Christmas decorations. I just wanted something. My grandmother, the dead one, had this green laundry basket, and so I'd placed that downstairs. I'd filled a trifle bowl with baubles, and then I'd surrounded this box with lights. But I wanted more decorations, and someone told me that they were in the loft. And so, me being me, and me not waiting around for anybody, I got the stepladder out, and I went to the top of the stepladder. Now, I'm a bit shaky with heights anyway. I'm a bit shaky on this ladder. But this wasn't the problem. The problem was that the ladder isn't balanced correctly ever since it lost one of these rubber things that holds it in place. So it was lopsided. And I went up and couldn't see anything. So then my brother went up with his torch and he couldn't see anything either. And then I said, well, I'll go up another time with your torch because I'm taller than you. Through whatever way, whatever happened, the ladder tipped on its side. It smashed the lamp that you can see behind me that I had been using to light my videos. That had been my nanoanalysis, so that was a bit of a disappointment, let me tell you. I cracked my head open on the corner of a wall. Now, if I lift up my fringe, none of you can really see the scar here. I know that, but we'll get to that in a minute. Immediately, I just start shouting out because my younger brother's there, and I refuse to... I just refuse to acknowledge when I am in pain. And this has been a bit of a difficult one in terms of things in my life, but I worry that some people might see me as a hypochondriac, and so I just refuse to admit it. Similar to when someone might be embarrassing me and I choose to just hit back with them with other stuff that could embarrass me further, but I'm going to make sure that they're going to turn red as well. That sort of thing. And so I'm there on the floor just with this horrible pain in my head. And I mean, it was bad. And I'm just shouting, I'm fine, I'm fine. And my brother said in his inimitable style, you're fucking not, you're bleeding. And he threw this brown towel at me and I clamped that over my head. My mum wanted to see it, and I didn't want my mum to see it because I know that my mum's a worrier, and I worried that she'd think that this was worse than it was. And in my head I'm thinking, I'm going to end up having to go to A&E with this, but I really didn't want to. I wanted to stay home, just put a plaster on it, forget it ever happened. I turned around and I went into the bathroom, and through all this blood I could just see white beneath the blood, and I was like, is that skull? And I've never found out. I don't think it could have been a skull. I really don't think that it had gone down far enough for that. But I was terrified of that. And then I was like, oh, my mum's going to have to look at this and it's not going to stop bleeding. Apparently head injuries bleed worse. I spoke to someone at work and she'd also had a head injury that year when she fell over in Portugal. And they actually gave her stitches. I went off to the hospital, and if you watched the end of Vlogmas last year, I stopped it early because I had a really bad concussion. And I was there, and I was joking with the person on reception because that's just who I am. I go into this strange mode. It's what happens whenever something bad happens. I just seem to fall into the deepest depths of my sarcasm available. But I'm joking about how I've not needed paracetamol, I want to see what the pain's like and all this fun stuff. And they send me off to this waiting room. But because of that, the doctors didn't know how bad I was actually bleeding out of my flaming skull. I just realised that blood was dripping out of this dressing and going down my face, but obviously I didn't know how bad it was going to look to the other people who were there. And I remember this man who'd accidentally gone through his hand with a knife, and I was thinking, well, at least it's not his face. Because I do get embarrassed about anything like this. And I thought this is a really visible reminder of a time when Charlie fucked up. I absolutely did not want that. So eventually I got in to see the doctor and he pulled this dressing off and the blood immediately just starts pouring everywhere. And he's a bit annoyed with me because I didn't obviously tell them how bad it was, but also like I didn't want to tell them how bad it was because I was thinking, just put a bandage on it, I'll go home, I'll be fine. This comes to the point where they said they were going to glue it shut and put paper stitches on it. And then they started that. And he got someone else to come and look at it and it's like, do you think it'll be okay with stitches? Do you think it'll be okay with these, or do you think he needs stitches? And I was just hoping, please put stitches in, because I just thought stitches were going to be neater instead of what I got left with. This was because the person at work, they'd had stitches, and me being me, I'm incredibly rude, and I just thought they'd got another wrinkle. But I wouldn't have minded that. I wouldn't have minded having this strange wrinkle on my head. I'd had my hair cut in November, so I'd been sweeping that back the entire time, and then they said to me, oh, you're not allowed to wash your hair for however many days. I'm like, this is great. This is fantastic. I can't bear to go out of the house with greasy hair, and you're telling me I've got to. You're telling me I can't get any water near it, so I was washing in the sink in some weird, strange gentleman's shower sort of situation. And I didn't get the stitches that I so wanted. So they put these paper stitches on, and then they glued it, paper stitches. I was told the glue would sting. That was one thing I feel like I also should have said. I never told the doctor that it didn't sting and I couldn't actually feel anything. It just felt like my head had grown to this size. Obviously, there was some swelling there and there was this bandage over it. The bandage came off after 2 days. There are still videos with me with the bloody stitches. Paper stitches on my face. I was just determined to get through Vlogmas and act as though nothing had happened and I wasn't experiencing this concussion, that I'd be walking around and I'd realise I was in a bit of a daze, or I'd just be stopped in the shop incredibly dizzy. And that's the first time I've actually told anyone that, by the way. I didn't let on to anyone at the shop that I was experiencing any sort of symptoms at all. I just went about my day joking, feeling absolutely knackered and like I wanted to sleep all the time. And apparently with a concussion, if you want to sleep, you are supposed to sleep because of the healing process and all that. I wasn't doing that. I was forcing myself through the day, trying to force some sort of recovery. And as you know, it didn't work out. I stopped on the 23rd of December recording Vlogmas videos, came back to do things wrapping up the year, and then disappeared for nearly 2 months because I just needed that time to kind of recuperate. Scars. I've told the story, let's get into scars. How do I feel now I have a scar? Well, as I've said, it's not noticeable. But there were a few times at the start of the year where I'd see it in videos. Honestly, every time I saw it, it made me feel a bit sick. It served as a reminder of trying to do something nice and it failing. And it served as this strange reminder almost of being a bit hasty and being a bit stupid and just not waiting. I know that it's like basically disappeared now, but for those few months, obviously, Fringe again, and I was putting that back for that month and, you know, gelling it and all that fun stuff. And there have been times throughout this year where I still put my hair back and allowed the scar to be there, because it's like, it's a scar on your face, you're just gonna have to live with it. You know, some of the greatest movie stars, they have scars, but then I was reading about scars in fiction, and I mean, I have scars on my legs from when I used to fall over when I was younger and crack my legs open. I've got scars on my lips and on my gums from where they've cut my mouth open, and they're all okay because nobody sees those, but this one everybody could see, and everybody was asking me what had happened. Obviously my father came out with the great phrase, well, I always said you had a head like a, insert nasty C word here, face like a. My brother started calling me crackhead. All these jokes did nothing. They, you know, like, you couldn't find them. You found them funny at the time, but really they were just eating away at that little part of me that was actually terrified of how this was going to turn out. My manager had me putting vitamin E oil on it. I was taking vitamin E in the hopes it would heal. And now, if I scrunch up my face, I'm not showing you, I don't think it'll show up on camera anyway, but if I scrunch up my forehead now, this bit goes off on its own and does its own thing. And it's only when I get really close, because I always look in the mirror and have this hope that it's going to be gone, and it's always a bastard, and I get close enough and I can still see it's there, and the worst part is in my eyebrow here, which I always knew it would be because that's where I hit. And as I've said, it could have been worse. I could have, you know, jammed that corner straight into my eye and blinded myself. There are all these things. I could have cracked the skull. I could have had one of these awful brain hemorrhages. These things could have all happened. I have taken to wearing my fringe now more, and that is one of the things of, whilst I actually don't mind having long hair, you know, I think I do prefer my hair being longer to being shorter. The scar did play a part in that. One thing I also questioned about falling off that ladder was it a supernatural occurrence? Because last year, on the 18th of December, on the 17th of December, marked 6 months since my dad's mum died, my grandmother. And I had planned a video in which I talked about where I had come in my grief since then, and also to show you a Christmas card that I had mentioned discovering. And my dad brought this Christmas card home with him when he was clearing out my nan's house last year. And this is what the front of it looks like. This was the back. And I believe that this was supposed to be the farmhouse she used to live in. When you open it up, we have some incredibly bad handwriting from Charles. And I remember being at primary school. I must have been 4. And everybody at home called me Charlie, but at school they made me write Charles. It was supposed to be an exercise in spelling, and so I wrote, I love you, Nana Alice, here, only I didn't put the extra A on the end of Nan, and I spelt Alice A-L-S, and I spelt ho ho ho, H-O-W, H-O-W, H-O-W. That was supposed to be my Nana Alice, because those triangular bits are supposed to be her hair. And I just realised that was supposed to be Santa Claus. I remember it clearly now. That's his sack. At the time, when she died in June last year, I remember thinking that we hadn't been that close. And that dampened my grief a bit. And that allowed me the opportunity to not feel as much as I was feeling. But I remember saying it was a strange kind of grief, because it was a grief that was ultimately compounded by guilt. And last December I wanted to talk about how the feelings of guilt hadn't really dissipated because of this card. Because had she not kept this card, and she'd kept it in pristine condition for 22 years at the time, I wouldn't have known that she perhaps thought more of me than I thought she did. There was some part of me that always thought that she preferred the other grandchildren because they've gone into farming careers, or they've lived lives that she thought that they've lived their lives how she thought they should live their lives and the way she thought their lives should go. And they've had children when she thought they should have children. They've got partners and they're just living lives she could understand. And obviously I chose to be a writer. And then I found this. Well, I didn't find it. Then my dad found this and he brought it back and gave me this sense that maybe she might not have understood the career I've chosen and the life I live, but she still felt enough about me to keep a card from 22 years before. I mean, then it was made worse by the fact that she had a copy of Our Doris, managed to get to chapter 4 before her macular degeneration meant she couldn't read on further. There was the fact that she'd kept the 2 articles that the papers wrote about me when I released my books. Even certain other people in my family haven't been kind enough to do that. I have this sense that maybe she had this pride that was silent that she didn't want to reveal to anybody, because that just isn't how it's done, you know. You don't go bragging about these things. I know she definitely told her sister, because her sister, my Auntie Doris, also went out and bought a copy. Well, no. My Nana Alice bought a copy and sent it to her sister. Rather than talk about 6 months of grief, I'll talk about 18 months, because it's been a year now and we are still going through the process of probate. There has been a lot of issues with her will. She wanted to leave all of her money to a donkey sanctuary that no longer exists. So we were trying to find a different charity to give that money to, because we're not allowed to have it for ourselves, and it is a considerable sum, in the tens of thousands. There's a cousin that she already gave money to and thought that that money had been taken out of her will, but it hadn't been taken out of her will. It's this constant reminder, and it's also this thing when you're just wondering, when is it actually going to stop? When are they just going to be finished with this will, get it all sorted? Because it just feels like this thing that you're not finally able to say, oh, she's gone, because you're still having to deal with all this stuff that she did whilst alive. And again, that was really her solicitor's fault, because he took power of attorney, which apparently he shouldn't have done, and it was a whole thing. I'd say in terms of grief, there are moments of sadness, like thinking about this and thinking about how we were never able to, well, we never did converse about that or talk about that. I used to go out with her and my mum every Friday when I was at uni. That stopped. And for about 3 years, I rarely saw her, even though she was only around the corner, just because of the way work turned out and all the obligations I had. There was one time before she died when I saw a car parked outside her house. I'd heard her saying that she didn't trust the lady who was her carer, and it was pouring down with rain. The people who were caring for her worked for the same charity I do, and so I thought, well, I'll just call in. And so I knocked on the door, and so my last actual proper experience with her wasn't one of her laughing, it was one of her trying to get me out of her house, because she liked everything to be regimented. She didn't like these sorts of uncalled visits, but I was determined that I was going to make sure things were okay. So that also has a mild bit of hurt about it, in that the last real thing she did was basically throw me out of the house so she could get things sorted with a carer. It's not really a memory that I'm gonna hold on to. There are photos of her with me where I can tell she didn't want her photo taken. Since she died, I've thought a lot more about her life, which I'd never done before. I always knew that she lost her first husband, but because you always see your grandparents as old, which is a horrible thing to say, but it's true, I had got it into my head that, oh, she must have been, you know, old enough to deal with grief. And then I discovered that she was 26, 27 when her first husband died, and she was alone with 3 kids. And so then it begins to make sense to me why she married again quickly and had her second husband adopt her children. And there's a lot that makes sense to me, because even though she's only a year older than my other grandmother, she always seemed a lot older in her values. I have begun to respect that a bit more over the last 18 months. It's definitely changed the way I thought about her. It's given me another sense of guilt and regret that I never talked with her more about it, but I also don't know that she is the kind of woman that would have ever shared that information with me. And before anyone asks, I didn't name Alice Valentine in commemoration of her name. It just happened, and I created this character way before she died, which was another reason I actually stopped writing the secret book. I can say that now. I stopped writing the secret book last year in June to July because her name was Alice, my character's name was Alice, and just writing the name all the time was a bit of a hard thing to do. I think sadness fades, and I think guilt fades, but I also know that there are things from 17 years ago now, when my granddad died, that I still struggle with sometimes. And whilst they say grief is a process, I don't think it's ever an ending process. I think that days just get more manageable. The thoughts aren't necessarily any more thoughts of that are tinged with, well, they are tinged with sadness, but they are thoughts that can become a bit happier, and you think about happier times more because it's easier to think of those times. But, you know, you can also think about the arguments and think, well, it wasn't all as rose-tinted as I like to believe it was. This Christmas card from a 4-year-old really did me dirty last year. I can just remember being sat there in the waiting room thinking that the whole reason that I'd fallen off the ladder was as a reminder from the spirit of Nana Alice that I wasn't supposed to forget to have made this video. So I knew that even though it's 18 months later, even though I was going to record this a year ago and share it, and share how the grief really hasn't faded that much, the days are easier. I don't think about it all the time, and I'm kind of holding on to this Christmas card a bit. That was a bit of a long video today, talking about scars and grief, and I realised that it got a bit melancholy at Christmas time. I hope that I wasn't oversharing, but I also hope that you got something out of this video, and until next time, that is all.